instead of talking about my life, I'm going to refer to it because I think my purpose here is to come in, first of all, get the pleasure of meeting all of you, and to maybe offering some suggestions on what might make it better for you. Because I started out working and I was to take shorthand and typing. Became a good typist, but I never became a good shorthander. The result was that it wasn't my kind of job, but it was a job. And at that time, you took a job. This was in 1940. That's years ago. I can't believe how many years ago. But anyhow, that's years ago. And life was different then, awfully different. We had had a very severe depression when I was growing up. And a lot of the things we had to do by bartering. Have you ever heard of bartering? You offer one thing to get another. So you're offered to do something to get another. And so we did a lot of bartering. And for instance, thought I'd like to be an actress. And so there was a little theater that was going up in Providence, Rhode Island, which is where I was brought up. And I didn't have the money to take lessons or anything. So I went up and I talked to the lady, and we made a deal that she would teach me how to, project my voice and so forth, things like that. But I would do, we had problems getting products, so that there would be lines formed. You see a line, you stand in it, and you get whatever they had available. So what I would stand for her was cigarettes and silk stockings. So I'd see a line, I'd get into it, and whatever they had to offer, I bought. Now, I didn't have money, so she gave me the money for it. So actually, she was buying it, but I was standing in line for it. And that was how I bought it. I gave my time. And she started me with singing lessons, actually training the voice. And it was neat, because what she started was, oh, wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being, oh, wild west wind, thou breath of autumn's being. And you just go up and up and up and up and up, and down and down and down and down and down on one breath. Believe it or not, it was work. But it was fun. So I'd go around the house and I'd go, oh, wild west wind, thou west of autumn's being, and so forth, so on. And my poor mother and father had to put up with it. Poor things. Anyhow, that's how I started to get trained that way. We didn't have a lot of money, and there had been a very severe depression, and we were not doing all that doggone well. But we were managing. And my particular family had a real advantage. I had two older sisters who were working in Washington, D.C. for the federal government. And every month, they sent money home. They were just the best people in the world. We wore hand-me-down clothes. When you outgrew something, you gave it to someone for the next people to wear it. And so for years, I was used to wearing it down. I didn't like it, except for my shoes. My shoes were always my own. But otherwise, anything I had might have been handed down to me. And it was okay. I had clothes. I didn't have to worry. I did get pretty clothes sometimes, and sometimes they were a little too large. But usually they weren't too small, because at that time, that had gone on to somebody else. But it wasn't a bad life at all, and what we had was glorious. We had the most wonderful music in the world. We had to us, you see, my generation, that period was just a magic period of music, all kinds, wonderful music that you wanted to hum all the time. You were singing I know most of the songs that for years now, and somebody comes and I am singing along with them quietly. Actually, not actually singing, mouthing them. But it was a wonderful time to grow up, because everybody helped each other. We shared. And there was no hatred, not very much hatred in the world. We didn't have time to hate. We had other worries. And it was just wonderful. And so, yeah, I don't feel at all sorry. I didn't have a lot of, we had no, we didn't have computers, of course. We didn't even dream of computers. But we had a lot of time to play out on the streets. We jumped rope. We went for walks. We hopped, we skipped, we jumped. We were always having very active, very physical. And that was wonderful. It took care of our energies. You know how you guys have a lot of energy. Well, that helped to take care of a lot of it. And it was a different way of life. It just was. But it was a good way of life. It wasn't a bad way at all. You didn't have things, but you had people, and you had activities, and it was wonderful. So that it was a good youth. Because you don't need things. It isn't things that are going to make you happy. It's the things that you can accomplish. It's the things that you have. And of course, I was a reader. I don't remember learning how to read. I've been reading ever since I can remember. And probably was reading before then. I loved books. In fact, one year my mother gave me, I think I was about 11, when my mother gave me my first dictionary, my own personal dictionary. Wow, I went around all day hugging it and looking it up, and I didn't let go of it all day long. And this was wonderful. So that it was a good life, and it was an active life, and it was a productive life, because we were taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. And to me, that's one of the best things. My goal in life is to do for others as I would like to have them do for me. You know, you share, because it makes you feel good to share. Sharing is wonderful. I don't like anything that isn't, that people are selfish. Some of them are selfish, so you don't pay any attention. They can't be helped. Poor things. But anyhow, I knew I had to work, because otherwise, it was one of these things. I had no choice. I had to work. And so I worked overtime to conquer the typing. As I say, I never conquered the shorthand, but I can work with it. And I worked that way. That was my first job, was working in an insurance office. And that was a wonderful experience, because I had to do a lot of things myself. I even was helping to issue some of the policies, and so forth and so on. So it was a lot of activity, and I learned how to work with people. I learned to work alone. I learned to work as a group. And I've had lots of jobs, because I was even a Kelly girl in New York City, because I went to New York City when I was 21 to get into the theater. Well, obviously I wasn't going to get paid initially. I would be lucky if I got much at all. I did earn a little bit, but not a great deal. I had to take other jobs. For periods of time, I took permanent jobs for 2 or 3 years to save up some money. And then I'd take some time off, and I always worked. And the Kelly girl was great, because actually you get to a taste of every type of office. And you get to learn a lot about them. And it's a very good way. I actually found a job through that. It was a very good one. They had gone as a temp to the Ruder & Finn, which was a public relations firm. And I fit like a glove. They had me for a few weeks, and then one day they said, "Would you be wanting to work for us for $100 a week?" Would I? Wow, $100 a week, here I come. And it was a wonderful job. I did all sorts of things. I was working with the artists. I was developing all sorts of designs. I was writing speeches. I was doing whatever that person, our client wanted. And it was a wonderful job. And it was great for me, because it gave me a very broad experience. So, and I've worked all my life. I've worked about 50 years. I don't know. I was 18 when I started, and well, in a way, I'm still working. I don't know enough to stop and just play. Leisure is great, but frankly, for me, it's more interesting and exciting to be with people, to learn to talk talk with people. One of the things that I brought some books I thought might be interesting, and I'll leave them here for if you want them. And that I think about this one, for instance. He was a very famous man, and you can learn a lot from him. Dale Carnegie. And this is a book, Facts About Well-Known People. Well, you might get something from there. You might get a clue. And one of the things, when I was 10, I began to think in terms of, well, what do I want to be? I thought I'd like to be a lawyer. So I had a couple of lawyers in the family, and that sounded like a good profession. So I did some research, and I had come to really love this, admire very much, this man back in the 19th century and early 20th century who was a very famous lawyer. And then one day, another person asked him, is this law just? And he snapped back, I'm not concerned with justice in the law. Law is concerned with the letter of the law. I knew I didn't want to be a lawyer, period. That was the end of that career. So, and I think you can learn that way. And so I think, and I, of course, learn a lot from books. Sure, I use the computer. Frankly, it drives me batty. It's not my thing. However, I use it because it's the only way to communicate now. And, but it isn't my rhythm. You know, I could type at 100 words a minute with no more than 3 errors. Now I'm picking because it isn't the same rhythm. It isn't my rhythm. It's their rhythm. And it's not me. So that's where I come from. What I've done, I've worked in, as I said, the part-time jobs gave me an opportunity to test a number of different professions and businesses to see what matched. And it paid money. It's a good way to start, part-time jobs. So that was one of the hints that I thought I'd like to leave with you. I think it's also something we have to be aware of. Here we are in a world of many, many, many cultures. I think we have to be aware of the other person's culture. That helps us. For instance, a salesman might have a wonderful product to sell. He's talking to someone in China or Japan. They have a different way of approaching it. The American is, well, okay, you want it, let's go with it. The Japanese or Chinese have a slower routine. They have a certain, we have to have a little bit of social life first, serve you tea or what have you, and they like to discuss. It's rude in their country to come in and say, okay, here's what we're offering, let's settle it. They want to talk about it. That to me, to them, that's bad manners. And there was one book I thought I still had, but I must have loaded or given away when I moved here. I had to give away a lot of books. That deal fell through. Both had wanted product. One had wanted to sell it, one had wanted to buy it. But they irritated each other. They distrusted each other because the American was saying, what's he fooling around for? Why don't we get to the answer? And the Oriental would say, what is he trying to put over on me? End of deal. So it is important to understand how the other person is going to react to what you have to say. Be aware of the other person. One of the books, I don't have that book. I may have loaned it, who knows. But, I'd love to have books that tell you about it. This one, for instance, is written by a man who was a TV journalist, Dan Rather. He started out in Texas. He wanted to do it. He learned how to do it. It's interesting to read a book like this where you're learning how the person learned, how he achieved it, what that profession requires. This is a very demanding. You might be called in the middle of the night to have to get out of bed and get there and find out what's happening and get the first message out. And it could be any time. He might be away from home for several days a week because he had to travel. He had to go to the country where the incident was happening. this is all, this is life. Your job becomes very much your way of life. You're pretty much ruled by it. And if you have the time, if you want to give the time, if this is what you really want to do, and you're really skilled for it, and that's how one of the things you have to sort of be honest about yourself, to yourself. What are your talents? What are your gifts? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And are you willing to go the route? And that's very much so what you want to be. And you can start at age 10 to think about it, because look, this gives you the leisure to learn. And what's more precious than the leisure to learn? And that's all. I thought that was the way you could learn a little bit from my experiences. You learn from my mistakes. And maybe you won't make you'll make different mistakes at least, but you won't be repeating with my errors. So now I've sort of given an outline then. So I'll tell you a little bit of some of my personal experiences. Two of my sisters worked for the federal government, as I had mentioned to you earlier. I was not going to follow my sister's footsteps. One day I get a phone call from my sister in Washington, saying, Evelyn, that was my full name, but I haven't used it for years. I'm Lyn, officially. No, maybe not officially, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm Lyn. She said, Evelyn, they're having a civil service examination over at such and such a place, such and such a time, Saturday morning. I want you to go. Well, for peace in the family, I went. I took the tests, the federal tests, which at the time were very demanding. Now they're practically a farce, but at the time were very demanding. And I passed it, and I began getting postcards. Well, I had no intention of going to work for the federal government, so I tossed the postcards away. Phone rings. Ellen, I can't believe you haven't received any offers. I mean, you had good marks. Oops. So I had to keep some. I had to go into, so I got a card, and this was to work in Social Security. And this was a mass thing. They had, the big interview was everybody who was applied. We go into this room, and there are a whole row of seats, and they're facing one seat and one desk this way, desks and seats. And I took one look at it, and I turned on my heel and walked out. That was not what I was going to be doing. So then I took another one, and was looking for a job at that point. At that point, I was working in the home office of the penny company in New York City. And I was in middle management, so forth, so on. But I was dead-ended because I was a woman. That was, I was a token. For years, I was a token woman. I was the third generation of token women in my family, because it started with my aunt. And it was better, but it wasn't that great. So I also returned the card to the federal government, saying I was interested, and went to a couple of other interviews. And I thought, well, I want to get out. Let's see which one comes along first. It happened to be that one. And that was a job as a wage hour investigator under the Fair Labor Standards Act. Now, the Fair Labor Standards Act is the act that sets minimum wage, overtime, child labor, that sort of thing. So I was interviewed in New York City by three men, and one played the devil's advocate. He was the challenger, and then somebody else was there to be supported, kind of deal. But this is a whole routine at that time of how you interviewed. And so they asked me what I thought about government. Did I approve a large government or a limited one? I said the government should only take care of federal matters and leave the other local matters to the lowest local possible. See, that I didn't know at the time, but that would be considered the Republican view. Well, that is oversimplifies the Republican view, because I'm neither one, and I've always voted person, which I told was not the way to go because the power was in the party, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, but I still am going to vote person. That's me personally. And whatever you want to vote, that's your right. And I happen to like to vote person rather than party. Matter of fact, I don't like parties like that because I think once you become political, you sometimes forget your reason for being there, which is to help the people and help to keep the country strong. For me, the important factor is building my country, having a strong country, having a country where everybody has a chance to work and where there's justice and all so forth and so on. I know I'm naive. At my 95 years, I'm still naive. I still believe in the future. I still believe in good, and I like good rather than bad. I don't hate anybody. I may not like everybody, but I don't hate anybody because we're all persons. You think your own thoughts, you have your own background, you have your own experience, and you are independent. You are all intelligent people, and you will be able to use that intelligence. And that's all you demand, right? That's all any of us demand. But this is my feeling. I was successful. I was considered very successful as a woman. I ended up as a GS-13. The government starts with one, well, it did start at, when my sisters did, at ones and twos, but those were just for women. And they were a long time eliminated. I don't even really know what the lowest grade now is. But I went in as a 7, as a wage hour investigator. We were trained to know the laws, to read all the papers involving them, and we went out to find the illegal employment and so forth. One of the things I always worked for on, to as much as money, was child labor, because sometimes children are exploited. For instance, I've found situations where somebody had 2 different names for companies, had 2 sets of books, and they were hiring kids under 14 and not paying minimum wage. A lot of times I would find a deal. This would be less expensive clothes made here in New York City, and that was, to me, that was wrong, and these people needed to be corrected. Later on, when I became a wage hour investigator, which is 1960, I was dealing with refugees from Europe, well-educated people from Romania, whatever, and they couldn't speak English, and they were working in sweatshops. They were just as bad in 1960 as the ones had been in 1905, where it was a very hot middle of the summer. The back door was locked. No one could use it. They had no air conditioning. They were working slave terms. Some cases, they did sewing at home and just used the machines. You know, and that was in 1960. I could say, quite safely predict that somewhere in this country that is still happening, because there are always people who are going to exploit. But then there are also wonderful people who, when something happens, pay for your salaries until the place is renewed, is restored. So, and most of the way, basically, I think most people are pretty darn good. But then you also have the ones that, they don't quite make it, my point of view. And not to be I try not to judge anyone except my own experience. I don't prejudge anybody. I just, if the people are unjust, they're unjust. And if I was always very alerted when the man said, well, I'm doing them a favor to keep them. Oh, really? Tell me about it. How would you get it done without them? You don't say that, but I couldn't help thinking it. And I can remember one man who was really raved and ranted at me, and my only way of protecting myself was to be detected. He wasn't yelling at me. He was yelling at the Department of Labor. I wasn't the Department of Labor. I just worked for them. And that was the way I was able to handle it. But some people quit it because they couldn't handle it. It bothered them to be hated. And of course, nobody likes to be monitored, let's face it. And I'd go in, and I was always very polite, and civil and so forth, so on. That's how I was trained. Sometimes the man would go in, I put the federal government, show you a check. Yeah, showing me a check. That is their way, not my way. And, I don't think they were supposed to do it that way. That is not what we were told to do. But do we always do what we're told to do? Oh, no. We're all individuals. But anyhow, I don't want to exceed. But this is my feeling, and it's my life, and it's how I've led it, and it's how I'm leading it now. You live for others as well as yourself. And that's the only way you're going to be happy. And I'm a happy person. I'm perfectly happy doing all sorts of silly dances. And they've seen me do it. But if you have any questions, I wanted this to be a conversation, but obviously we don't have time. But if you have any questions at all, anything you want to ask me, I'd be happy to answer them. No question? Oh.
The favorite thing that you like to do to pass the time as a kid?
Today? Well, I'm a writer. I write all the time. As a matter of fact, and I brought this just for the fun of it, at Southgate, I write a column called Lyn Spin. And now, this was what I say, for instance, about a show that we had. Here. This is Richard Clark presents Clarence Darrow. Clarence Darrow was a lawyer in late 19th, early 20th century. And this actor does a fantastic job. He is a character actor, and he brings historical figures to life. His show is based on biographies, personal letters, and books. And tonight, the life and times of Clarence Darrow will be brought to life as Clark takes us from a small Ohio town to the national stage of the Scopes Monkey Trial. Join us for this roller coaster ride into the mind of complex American history. And that was the posting for it in our the activities. My Lyn Spin was about something called Wicked Pissed, which is, I've got it here. Wicked Pissed. I'm going to leave that for you. And that's a story. Author Ted Reinstein, Wicked Pissed. On May 15th, Ted Reinstein, WCVB TV Chronicle nightly news reporter, talked about New England's famous feuds in Wicked Pissed. This covers the American Revolution, family feuds, the first airplane, Smithsonian. How could you? And I'll explain what that means. Fights, sports, politics, and Poe. Ted started with the Revolution. What a mix-up. Bunker or Breed? That refers to Hill in Boston. The Shays' Rebellion, etc. Then he tackled the first plane that flew. Wasn't it the Wright brothers? Oh, there were shenanigans. Let's say it wasn't on the up and up. The hour flew by, the audience was entranced, and some even had to borrow to buy the book. At least one had to read to page 88 that night herself. Wicked Pissed is not to be missed, Lyn. And that's what I do as a hobby. I write for the paper. But I'm a writer, so a writer writes. And I didn't find out I was a writer for years, but I was writing all my life. But I never thought of it as writing. It wasn't published. So I've got 5 minutes more. No more questions? And I'm sorry, I don't think have I really answered your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
She asked about your childhood. What was your favorite part of your childhood?
Oh, my childhood? Well, let me think. Well, when I was very little, we lived right across from Roger Williams Park in Providence, Rhode Island, and I just loved the carousel. And every time I was a very good girl, my mother would take me over there, and I would ride on the horses, up and down, up and down, up, up. That really was fun. But that was when I was very little. Then all my life it's been books. And from the time I was very small, I really loved history. From the time I was, maybe we'll say offhand, from the time I was born, because we'll consider that, I just loved history. So everywhere I went, for instance, everywhere I moved, I did research of the place. I've written about Alexandria, where I lived for a long time. I've written about New York City, and I toured around New York City. I knew more about New York City when I was living there than somebody who lived in Brooklyn or Bronx. And so one of the girls in the office would say, well, we're going to take a vacation, just go to New York City. What should we see? They had never been above 42nd Street. Oh, for goodness sakes, that's just the start. Let's go. And I planned a whole trip for them. They had a ball. So, see, I knew from the time I was very little that I loved history. So I was very much oriented to it, you know. And I can remember seeing, I loved houses that had big stories about what the wife had committed suicide or something like that, or when a door is locked, that how could the person have gotten in and out? Oh my goodness, I love it. And one time, a batch of us, there were about 5 of us girls, decided we were going to visit this haunted house. The door is open, so we go in, we look around. Lovely old house, you know, and you have lovely ceilings and a fireplace and all this routine. And then all of a sudden we heard a sound. Sounded like a door banged. Oh my God. Out we were. And then we all stood on the street feeling very, very sheepish because we really shouldn't have been there in the first place. I did a lot of silly things, you know. Well, we all do. Don't be silly. It's okay to be silly, you know. And I don't mind, you know? And it just comes naturally to me. But anyway, any other questions? Yes.
He was wondering what your friends' names were growing up.
Well, I had a wonderful friend. Her name was Amy, and her daddy was a minister. And their house was closer to school than mine, so we would play at her house a lot. And we'd go in, of course, and first thing they had a wonderful lady who was like you know, the kind you dream about. She was sort of happy, and she was always laughing, and she was sort of big, and she made the most wonderful desserts and stuff. And we always had something for when he got out of school. That was one of my favorite places. And she was fun. I would go with Amy when she had to go to collect tithes for her daddy. And so we got to know some of his people. And it was just neat. All the family had red hair. And of course, I have loved red hair since I was born. It appears that there was a man who lived on, a young man who lived on our street when I was very little. I don't remember him. But he had red hair. I was never to leave the porch. So I never did. But when I saw that red man, I left the porch. And he would bring me back after taking me somewhere and getting me ice cream cone or something. I wonder if that ice cream cone had anything to do with my liking red hair. But it was fun. There were a lot of fun things in my life. You know? And I do not laugh at myself. I think I'm a very funny lady, and it was funny. And I'll stop with this. It had nothing to do with helping you, but when I had a friend who lived in New Jersey, she had 5 children. I went to visit her one Saturday overnight, and she had a little boy, Kevin, who was 5 years old. Well, Kevin was fascinated with me because, as you can see, my face says everything. I mean, it's constantly moving. I didn't even know that until the first time I saw myself on a camera, on a one of those things. And it was shocked. I thought, I make faces. Oh, do I make faces? But I can't do anything about it. So, hey, look upon it as a gift. When in doubt, say thank you. But it really, it's so much of life is attitude. And I think you can be, if you don't belittle yourself, don't ever belittle yourself. Don't ever, just be impatient. Just say, okay, fine, that wasn't one of the better things to do, so think about it, you know? But don't ever laugh at yourself. Well, yeah, laugh at yourself, that's okay. You can laugh at yourself because, oh, there I go again kind of deal. That's okay. But I mean, don't belittle yourself ever. Every one of you is a person. And as a person, you are entitled to respect. You are entitled to be treated as you would like to treat others. Okay? And that's, I guess that's my final message. Do act toward others as you would toward yourself. I think that's the best rule I've ever heard in my life. And basically, it is. Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to love you. They don't. And one of the things I discovered was I have apparently a particularly very evident personality, I guess, because people either like me or dislike me for the very same reasons. On in one case, they're irritated. It irritates them. In another case, it amuses them. It's how you take me. You know, all right, sorry.
Well, we've enjoyed having you. What do we say? 5 yellow to Miss Lincourt. Thank you. A round of applause.
Thank you. Thank every one of you, because you're a joy, absolutely a joy. And when you were there visiting at Southgate, I was as happy as my dad used to say, as happy as a clam. I don't think a clam's very happy, but Daddy used to say, I'm happy as a clam.
And Katie, we have something for Miss Lincourt. A little thank you note for joining us.
Oh, hi. I choose sweet.